All right, I'm Sean Compel.
I'm Storri.
And we also have Diana Rodriguez. And we're talking about ending homelessness through the use of tiny homes. The problem is that the city of Evansville pays $21 million every year so that 700 people can stay homeless, when we could be spending $7 million a year to actually give them houses. Tiny homes offer stability that shelters just don't offer. What we would offer is a program that gives housing to homeless people, rent-free through the use of milestones. It reduces taxpayer burden quite substantially. It increases the general well-being of homeless people, which is measured in lowered use of social services. And in other projects that have done this, it has a high retention rate of around 77%. Now, our primary target for funding would be the city and private donations. Our primary contact through the city is Gail Killow, who is the development specialist in charge of homelessness. Our secondary target is, of course, homeless people who would be utilizing our service. And our secondary source is endhomelessness.org, their Housing First program that they offer there. Comparing what we do now to the use of tiny homes, our system of shelters is a temporary solution at best. Still a lot of people supplement with ER visits and actually intentional incarceration. Tiny homes offer a permanent solution. It's actually making homeless people no longer homeless. With shelters, like I said, high rates of ER visits and incarceration, and in other programs that have used tiny homes, we see ER visits down 34%, incarceration rates down 76%. With shelters, there's a negative emotional impact because it's not a permanent solution. They're still homeless. In tiny homes programs, detox visits are shown to be down 82%. Now, our current programs cost the city $21 million a year every year, whereas programs using tiny homes show we could lower that to $7 million every year.
Now, with our business model, we had to take in aspects and important things that we need to take into consideration with doing our tiny home projects. We started with value propositions and then key resources and activities we need to. Then we had to think about our partners and our customers, of course. With the value, we need to think about for homeless people who need the basic survival and shelter, our tiny homes are the most effective and way for them to have a home. And with that, it's better than unlike the shelters that they currently have and jails, where now these tiny homes are providing them with emotional stability, whereas it's more cost effective, and as well it's lowering the rates for the taxpayers. Now, with that take into consideration, what we needed to have this project take foot is, with our physical resources, what we need is land, tiny homes, the materials to make it, and as well as a basic blueprint of how we're going to design these. With human resources, we need to take into consideration who is going to build these tiny homes and what's going to happen to our tiny home community whenever it goes forward. With the land, the city of Evansville is always tearing down old buildings, and that land is just sitting there. It's costing them more to just have it sitting there than for us to take over and build our tiny homes there. Now, with the blueprints, we were considering taking the University of Evansville had someone who already had designed a tiny home, and when we spoke to our primary source, she talked about how if anyone were ever to take the tiny home project forward, they would use the blueprint of that tiny home, so therefore we are taking that one as well. With volunteers, we were thinking about Habitat for Humanity and people who want to just do community service to help out and build these tiny homes. Now, when it comes to who gets these tiny homes, we had to take into consideration like creating a system of selecting. That's why we were thinking of first dealing with people with disabilities and PSSD. And then from there, change from open it to a more wide variety of audience.
Okay, so we have 5 partners in our business model, starting with probably the most important one, which is the City of Evansville. This is going to be the key resource to our funding and donations, and in turn, the city is receiving a showpiece for Evansville, the homelessness rate is going down, and they're spending less money on the homeless. For our modern tiny home design, we're going to be using UAV Wesley Peters tiny home design, which is actually open to the public. You can tour it, and the price to buy these plans is relatively low. We're going to be partnering with Echo Housing for funding and collaboration on building, as well as Habitat for Humanity on collaboration on building. And this is important because the homeless people are actually going to help build the tiny homes, and that just gives us more volunteers. And then for the Evansville shelters, this is where we're going to be finding homeless people and in turn helping them with capacity. So we have 3 customer segments. Our base customers are the City of Evansville and Evansville shelters, and then our ultimate customer is obviously homeless people. So starting with Evansville shelters, this is probably the most critical relationship because this is where we're getting our data, our information, and the location of homeless people. Again, in turn, we're helping them with capacity because all of the shelters have been maxed out for a while. We're going to be having a relationship with the Department of Metropolitan Development, who specializes in homelessness. That's another reason why we should keep that relationship strong. And then to connect with the homeless people, we will be, as Diana was talking about employees earlier, we'll have a landlord/manager, for lack of a better term, that will be constantly interacting with his homeless people, making sure they're on top of their programs, and then also keeping up to date with the tiny homes, making sure they're running, relaying that information to us, and in turn we'll be connected with homeless people that way. So our main channel to reach the community, so Evansville in general, or any outside parties, is through city officials. So again, another reason we need to keep that relationship strong. And then our main channel to reach homeless people is spreading word through shelters. So us, as well as city officials, will be spreading word to the owners and the workers of the shelters, and then they will be spreading word to those homeless people. So 11% of the homeless people in Indiana are in Evansville, but filling up our tiny homes community one time drops that to 10%. This also saves taxpayers $14 million every year. So overall, our idea drops the homelessness rate and saves taxpayers a lot of money.